Hello everyone, my name is MansaMusa and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm redefining what the word soon means. I know it's been a little bit since I last posted. I've had a lot of stuff going on in my life, so that's the main reason why, but I did want to get around to this video. It is part 2 of every CO in Advanced Wars best unit. If you missed part 1, check it out up top, but in that video we discussed all the COs from tier 4 to tier 2 in the standard rankings, and looked at every single CO's best unit. And what I mean by best unit is the most value add a unit gives for that particular CO. So for example, every CO's best unit just wasn't the Mega Tank, because that's the overall best unit in the game. Instead, I looked at why certain units might be better for one CO than another. So for example, Sammy's best units were her mech, because they're so much stronger for her than for other units, and similarly, Eagle's best units were his battlecopters. Moving into this video, we're going to be discussing all of the COs in Tier 1 and Tier 0, as well as the Luck COs, so we have all of those to look forward to. With all that being said, let's hop right into it and discuss our first Tier 1 CO, Sasha. Sasha, like some of the COs before her in the previous video, doesn't get any direct bonuses, either attack or defense, on any of her units, but due to her extra funding provided by her day-to-day power, she does have a clear best unit, her tanks. Sasha's extra funding allows her to break most maps' funding curves, changing an AWBW tank order to an AWBW tank order. This allows her to both define where engagements will take place on a map and provides her with an early advantage in each of these early engagements. Sasha can use this early advantage to win the capture phase, especially in a matchup against Hawk, who will have less defense of his units than Von Bolt, and help her maintain relevancy into the mid and late game, allowing her to tech up earlier and compete with Hawk and Von Bolt's attack powers, since they both have at least plus 10 attack on all of their units. Without this breaking of the tank order, going from an AWBW tank order to an AWBW tank order, Sasha would really be a much lower rated CO. Her power's ability to reduce the charge of her opponent, while good, would not be enough to save her from the tier 3 to tier 4 range. The moral of the story here is, if you want to win with Sasha, you have to take advantage of her income bonus. Get early tanks out, decide where to force the battle, often you're going to want to do that on your strong side, and win the economy game with those early fights. Moving on to my favorite CO in all of Tier 1, and someone I've argued before could even be in Tier 0.5, he's so good, we move now to Von Bolt. And unlike the others in Tier 1 who rely on the strength of their CO powers, the main advantage of Von Bolt is the passive 10-10 attack and defense he gets on all of his units. This makes all of his units much sturdier and harder to clear off properties. For this reason, I think Von Bolt's best unit is also his standard tanks. In Hawk or Von Bolt matchups, Von Bolt's tanks on cities cannot be two-shot by enemy tanks, even on maps with 2 comm towers. This allows Von Bolt to have terrain advantage on basically every engagement he takes in a match, especially when defending an area, and leads him to often winning the capture game early and getting out to early leads before something like a Hawk's Super CO power can help level the playing field. The reason I think Von Bolt is so crazy, though, is that with all of these advantages still factored in, he still has his Ex Machina in his SCOP. Von Bolt's Ex Machina, I think, is very underrated and often can be nearly as devastating as a Black Storm if done correctly. This is not a glazed Von Bolt video, though. I may make another video in the future talking about why I think he is just so strong, but at least for now we'll just be focusing on his best unit, and yeah, because of its sturdiness on tanks against either Von Bolt or Hawk, and even more so against Sasha, I think for Von Bolt his best unit is easily his tank. Moving now to Hawk, and like Olaf before him in Tier 2, Hawk is a CO that mainly relies on the power of his SCOP to win matches, and thus doesn't have a particular unit that really stands out. Unlike Olaf though, Hawk does get a passive 10% attack as a day-to-day bonus. All that being said, I think Hawk's best unit is the artillery. The artillery not only helps Hawk stall games, making the Super CO power more effective, in the same vein that arties for Olaf are some of his best units for that same reason, it also allows Hawks to clear Von Bolt tanks on cities. Well, I mentioned before in the Von Bolt section that his tanks cannot be two-shot by either Hawk or Von Bolt tanks when they're on cities, even on maps with 2 comm towers, which is all true. They can be two-shot on maps with just 1 comm tower if it's an arty and tank combo from Hawk. This is actually crucial for Hawk, as it allows him to get back some of the good terrain that Von Bolt so often steals from him on most maps. Additionally, on SCOP with just 1 tower, Hawk's artilleries can one-shot the Von Bolt 8 HP tank on plains or worse terrain. For the city clearing potential when combined with the tank, and also the wall breaking potential by itself on the Super CO power, I think arties are comfortably Hawk's best unit. Moving now to somewhat of the unloved stepchild of Tier 1, we now discuss Javier. And really it is unfair a little bit that Javier is so lowly played. I think it's really because in most situations Von Bolt is just better than him. Because Javier relies on getting at least one comm tower to get his plus 10-10 bonus as a day-to-day benefit, on maps with even slightly contested comm towers, it's almost always safer and therefore better to just pick Von Bolt. In addition, Javier's powers, while incredibly useful on pushes, are generally equal to, if not slightly weaker than Ex Machina, and thus he is not a common pick within the tier. But there are situations where I believe he can shine. Most notably, I think he is great on mixed-base maps where artilleries are common. In these situations, Javier's extra defense against indirect units can shine and makes his medium tanks his best units. A classy CEO indeed, Javier's medium tanks can truly become broken in these situations. Because of the extra defense against indirects, the natural counter of the medium tank, the artillery, becomes almost entirely ineffective against Javier, and thus they require a neo tank as a response. But this is hard to do on maps with lots of fronts, like on mixed space maps. In my recent match against Profeta, which I covered on this channel, link up top as well if you missed that video, I was heavily considering taking Javier on that map for the reasons I just talked about, but because the comm towers on that map were so contested, I was essentially forced into picking Von Bolt. Back to this video though, I think Javier's medium tanks are crazy effective in those specific situations that I talked about, and thus for me they are easily his best unit. Moving now to the broken tier, we will be discussing the tier 0 COs, and they really are an interesting bunch because they often break the game by turning certain units into monsters. There's no better example of this than the grandpa of Advance Wars himself, Sensei. Sensei actually has 3 completely busted units: his infantry, his mechs, and his battlecopters. Starting first with his battlecopters, they get plus 50% attack power, a truly ridiculous amount, and that makes them basically as good as other CO's bombers. Against a neutral CO like Colin, Sensei can one-shot infantry on planes without a comm tower, leading to absolutely ridiculous wall breaks. This would normally be a guarantee for a CO's best unit in any of the other tiers, but because tier 0 COs are so strong, there's actually 2 more interesting candidates: Sensei's infantry and his mechs. Moving on to these foot soldier units, Sensei gets plus 40% attack on both infantry and his mechs, making them stronger than Sammy foot soldiers. To top it all off, Sensei can spawn truly crazy amounts of either units with his Cop or Scop respectively, flooding the field with cannon fodder that are simultaneously threat to enemy infantry and light vehicles. This makes it hard to decide between the two, as well as the battlecopters I talked about previously, but I'll give the slight nod to the mech as Sensei's best unit. Like I mentioned before, being able to spawn nearly 15 to 20 of these units at 9 HP on cities with his Super CO power is completely broken, and instantly makes enemies' tanks, anti-air, and infantry in contested areas a non-factor. But even in uncontested backline cities, Sensei can still find value by combining his 9 HP mechs to get thousands upon thousands of extra income, allowing him to keep up with high-tech COs like Colin and Hachi in tier 0, and dangerous opponents like Eagle in tier 1 high funds. Sensei is broken, no doubt, but to me he is my favorite style of broken, incredibly aggressive with fun foot soldiers, battlecopters, and transports. And while I love all of these units and really any opportunity I get to play Sensei, to me the mechs shine through as his best unit in most cases. Moving now to Grit, and Grit's best unit is his tank. No, what are we doing here? Of course his best unit is the artillery. He's essentially basically solely designed around it. And while Grit gets +1 range on indirects, on all of his other indirects like rockets, carriers, and battleships, because those units are so expensive and slow and or limited to just C tiles, even Grit players will almost never build them. On the other hand, the arty becomes the bread and butter of basically every Grit player's army. The entire strategy revolves around surviving the early game while trying to get a decent economy to build a critical mass of artilleries and then slowly pushing forward to suffocate the opponent. At least this is what I've been told is the strategy. To be honest, I'm terrible at Grit in competitive play. I used to play him a lot back in the cartridge games where the AI would just leave all their units within Grit's range, which was, great fun. But against opponents with Brain, Grit is actually one of the trickiest COs to play in all of Advance Wars. And honestly, I still haven't really fully figured it out. But if you are looking for really great Grit games, check out Izanagi007 on the site or in the Discord. He is my king of Grit play in all of Advance Wars that I have seen, and watching him reminds me of why Grit belongs in tier 0 on most maps, at least in standard play. Going back to this video though, again, easily the artillery is his best unit. If Sensei was my favorite CO in the entire game, Sturm is a close second. If you can't already tell from watching this video or any of my other content, I love aggressive COs and movement-based COs, and Sturm combines the best of both worlds. He has probably the coolest movement bonus of the entire game. Instead of having powers that boost his movement, Sturm reduces all terrain modifiers to 1. This means that forests, mountains, reefs, and rivers do not reduce movement for Sturm's units. While that may not sound that broken at first, it is a crazy powerful ability, especially for units on tires, whose movement is reduced even more by these terrains. Speaking of these units, I think Sturm actually has two best units at different parts of the game. In the early game, Sturm's best unit is by far the Recon. Because of his day-to-day power, Sturm's Recons can move 8 tiles anywhere every turn. This allows them to reach any contested property on the map almost instantly, even those in choke points or other hard-to-reach areas, and interrupt captures, allowing Sturm to easily win the early income battle. Even in situations where capturing imps are guarded by tanks, because of Sturm's extra 20% defense, he can just sit his recons on properties, blocking captures, and taking multiple hits from tanks to clear. On the other hand, in the late game, Sturm turns to another rarely built unit in Standard, the Rockets. Like Recons, Rockets are on tires, which normally makes them horrifically slow and thus generally bad units to build as they lose to basic front shifting. But with Sturm's powers, Rockets become much more mobile and thus are able to respond to front shifts better and help support slower Sturm pushes centered around teched up units with Rockets. Because of this extra mobility, unironically, I believe Sturm is a much better Rockets commander than even Grit. Overall, Sturm is the R&R commander for me. Early game Recons and late game Rockets. They're both his best unit. Moving on to Kanbei. Kanbei's main gimmick is that in exchange for paying 20% extra for all of his units, they get plus 30% attack and plus 30% defense. If you do the math there, you can quickly see why he is in the broken tier. Kanbei's units are filthy. They all hit like trucks, so what you may ask is then, what is his best unit? Well, for me, it's just his standard tank. Because Kanbei pays 20% more for all of his units, it's going to be harder to buy tech ups and they won't get as much value. At the end of the day, a Neotank is one-shotting an infantry on the road, whether that's a Kanbei Neotank or an Andy Neotank. So having that extra firepower at times is just a net neutral and really a net negative when you consider the cost. Kanbei's tanks, on the other hand, are great value. At just 8,400 apiece, they hit ridiculously hard. Against a neutral CO like Colin with 1 tower, Kanbei gets a 9-3 trade, and sometimes even a 10-3 trade against other tanks on planes. Against infantry with just 1 tower, Kanbei is guaranteed to one-shot infantry on roads and has a small chance to one-shot infantry on planes. In short, that breaks the game. This allows Kanbei to break walls better than pretty much any other CO in the game, and in even unit trades, Kanbei will come out further ahead than any other CO as well. As an added bonus, this is all before we even factor in Kanbei's extra defense. A Kanbei tank on city will only take 4 HP of damage from a neutral CO's Neo tank, and in return will deal 1 damage back. It's insane. He is by far some of the scariest units in the entire game, and due to the firepower and mobility of the standard tank, with the relatively cheap cost of only 8,400 funds, they're by far his best unit. Unlike some of the previous COs that we've talked about in Tier 0, Colin is not great because of his day-to-day power. Instead, it is the snowball potential of his cop, Gold Rush, that makes Colin broken. When Gold Rush is popped, Colin instantly gets 1.5x his current funds. At just 2 stars, this allows Colin to spam the power, getting truly ridiculous amounts of money by the mid-game. But to balance this, his units lose 10% attack power. Who cares about that though, when Colin has the Mega Tank? While the Neo Tank also provides great value to Colin, the Mega Tank is by far his best unit. Because of Colin's 80% deployment cost as a day-to-day power, each Mega Tank only costs 22,400 to get out, basically the same price of other CO's Neo's tanks. And when you stack that with Gold Rush, Colin can get out 4 to 5 Mega Tanks by the mid to late game easily. While these units do have shorter movement, which can hurt on bigger maps, on smaller maps they completely solve Colin's power problems. A Colin Mega Tank with just 1 tower still one-shots a neutral CO's opposing Neotank on planes, and does a respectable 8-4 trade against a Mega Tank on planes. All of this for 6k less at base, with additional money coming in for Colin, means that in most games, Colin will have double if not triple your Mega Tank count. and provided he positions these mega tanks correctly, he should have no problem winning any contested areas of the map, making them easily his best unit. Moving on to Hachi, and like Colin before him, they're very similar in that they are both quote-unquote economy COs, but there are a few notable differences. For one, Hachi is much less snowball-y than Colin. His units are only 10% cheaper as opposed to Colin's 20%, and he gets just a flat 50% discount on units on his powers as opposed to Colin's 1.5x increase in funds. Both of them still punch out crazy amounts of money though, but because Hachi has the added ability of building troops on friendly cities on his SCOP, my best unit switches, and I believe that for Hachi it is his Neo-Tanks. While intuitively it makes sense for them to also be the Megatanks, given that building them on cities helps mitigate their main problem, which is the Megatank's slow movement, I lean Neos because often Hachi just doesn't have as much money as Colin, and therefore it is generally better to build 2 to 3 Neo-Tanks on the front line as opposed to 1 Megatank and maybe a few other smaller tanks or infantry. Granted, that may change on the point of the game that we're talking about, but especially in the mid-game, I would argue that there is no stronger power in the game than spawning 2 to 3 Neo-Tanks on the front line. That should instantly win you the contested properties in most situations. Additionally, because Hachi's discount is by unit purchased as opposed to the increase in funds like with Colin, you get more bang for your buck when you buy 2 Neos as opposed to just 1 Megatank. That's 22,000 funds saved for 2 Neo-Tanks as opposed to just 14,000 funds saved if you buy just 1 Megatank. To be honest though, for both Colin and for Hachi, the Neo-Tank and the Megatank are both incredibly strong units, and you can't go wrong with either one for either CO. But for me, when talking about Hachi specifically, I'll lean for the Neo-Tank. Finally, we get to the last 3 COs of the entire game, which I'm grouping together as the Luck COs. We will now be discussing Flak, Jugger, and No. In full transparency here, I have not really ever seriously played any of these COs. Well, I do have a lot of love for luck-based gameplay in Advanced Wars by Web, and I do famously go for some fun RNG rolls at times. My experience with them is definitely lower than with any of the other COs I've talked about in this video or the previous video so far. That being said, I think I can confidently say that for all the Luck COs, their best unit is the Infantry. Because luck damage is an additive bonus to damage dealt as opposed to a percent increase, infantry become incredibly destructive units that can take 5, 6, or even 7 and higher HP off enemy Neo-Tanks or Megatanks with a high enough roll. This obviously results in great value trades for any of those COs if you are able to high roll on some of those engagements. So for all of them, you want to make sure that you have plenty of infantry on the front lines at all points of the game, and especially when you go to pop your COP or SCOP respectively. This is especially true of No, as I believe she has the highest ceiling of all of these COs when it comes to these luck rolls. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is every single CO in Advanced Wars by Web and their best unit. I know this video did take a very long time to come out, at least part 2 of it. So I do apologize for that. I'm hoping that a lot of the life circumstances that I have going on right now will start to calm down a little bit and I'll be able to make more videos. But I did want to get this video out just because it has been so long. So I really hope you guys appreciated it. Let me know down in the comments if there's any other videos that you want me to cover, if there's any other replays I should really try to get to. I am going to be probably discussing a few more games going on in the Kessler co-op tournament that's going on now. I did co-live stream a game with Kessler a couple of weeks ago. I can try to pin that in the description as well. But with all that being said, thank you so much for watching, everybody. My name is MansaMusa, and remember, SCO's best unit is what you make of it. Bye, guys.